Look, it's no surprise that if you've been watching my channel for any period of time, well, I post a lot of videos about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But let's be abundantly clear here. I am a fan of all sorts of pop culture and big blockbuster action films. I love Star Wars, I love Harry Potter, I love Lord of the Rings. Yes, I do love DC, and of course, I love Marvel. I love all sorts of pop culture and fandom. It's just that, well, Marvel is more relevant right now. Let's be honest, even if you like DC more than Marvel, which is great, awesome for you, but Marvel is clearly more relevant now than DC. Literally, not even metaphorically, literally Marvel is pumping out content every single week. That is insane. And yet, as I sit back and look at all of the glory that Marvel has in store for us for over the next 10 years, I can't help but be a little bit apathetic. And honestly, DC has me intrigued. Let's talk about it. But first, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel and you would like to join the Access Blockbusters crew, make sure to do so, give this video a like, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know that this isn't maybe the most widely accepted opinion, and trust me guys, it's just an opinion. But stick with me here, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. So here's a couple of disclaimers before I even get into the main content of the video. Number one, do I have Marvel fatigue? The answer is no, I don't. Because I think that the type of content that Marvel is putting out is unique, it is fresh, it is not cookie cutter MCU material like we were seeing maybe early on in Phase 2 and maybe Phase 3. The stories that they're telling are very fresh, for the most part. Falcon and the Winter Soldier and maybe Black Widow notwithstanding. And even those two properties, I maintain, were very enjoyable and had huge merits on their own, so nothing against those two. The second disclaimer is no, you don't have to like one more than the other. You don't have to pick sides. I know this has been hammered into people's minds over and over and over, and yet we still see this ridiculous, unnecessary fighting between fans of DC versus Marvel. Who cares? Honestly, don't take sides. You can like both properties just as much and just as equally. It doesn't matter. This video is not for me to say that I like DC more than Marvel. And honestly, my YouTube channel is not a reflection that I like Marvel more than DC. So please don't take away any of that from this video because you are absolutely incorrect if you say any of that. But look, the MCU has been going on for 11 years. And I know DC has been making films for 50, 60 years, of course. But the MCU as we know it, that has reinvigorated and resuscitated the comic book movie genre since 2008, has been going on for quite a while now. And the Infinity Saga, ending with Endgame, basically, Spider-Man Far From Home, but basically ending with Endgame, told one complete story. It was epic. The battle for Earth is what they called it in the end of Avengers Endgame. However, people began to wonder, well, where do you go from here? Like, what do you do after you've connected the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers, Thanos, and all of his forces together into one gigantic movie with all the Infinity Stones? It felt like it was just too good to be true. But, Kevin Feige is building up to another Avengers Endgame level film. Fine. And it seems pretty clear that the direction they're going in is the multiverse. Because, I guess, how much bigger can you go from one Earth, one universe being destroyed? How about multiple universes being destroyed? I guess it makes sense. The problem I have is not with the fact that Marvel is starting from the beginning, basically in a Phase 1-esque scenario and building up its heroes again. That's not at all what I'm saying here. In fact, the thing that I'm actually the most concerned about is maybe the fact that they didn't reboot the universe. No. Before anyone says anything and says, oh, Access Blockbusters wants the MCU rebooted. No, that's not what I meant. What I mean by that is that by rebooting the MCU, hypothetically after Avengers Endgame, and wiping the slate clean, you begin with new stakes, you begin with new characters. But by continuing onwards in what I would call a soft reboot, where you're sort of finishing off Avengers Endgame and then continuing on with the same characters that are left in different stories and starting over in that way, well, it's sort of a soft reboot. The problem with that is that you still have to continue their stories within the construct of the MCU. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but with every single passing movie and every single passing show, the MCU just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And honestly, it gets more connected and more connected with each passing property. And ironically, it actually begins to shrink the world of the MCU. And here's the thing. I don't care as much anymore about connectivity. I don't care as much anymore about canon because I realize that the bigger the MCU becomes, the more exhausting it is to keep up with canon. Let's go through every Phase 4 property released as of the recording of this video thus far. And again, minor spoilers for every single one of them, including Shang-Chi. When WandaVision came out, everybody was like, where's Doctor Strange? He has to be in this series. Turns out he wasn't. People were questioning that. Why wasn't Doctor Strange in there? When The Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out, people, unbelievably so, because this didn't even cross my mind, but unbelievably at the end of the finale, people were like, where was Spider-Man? It takes place in New York. I mean, I guess. In Black Widow, people were like, why doesn't Tony Stark and Steve Rogers show up at the end? Because it makes sense, because it takes place during Civil War, or at the end of Civil War, so why don't they show up? Loki was a little less so. I mean, people were kind of speculating about Kang, but Kang hasn't been in an MCU property before, so we'll kind of count that one out. And you guys know my thoughts about Loki. You go watch the reviews that I've made, but I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, so there's that, but that's not related to this video. And Shang-Chi, people were like, hey, wait a second. Why aren't they referencing the blip? Why isn't anyone talking about the snap? What happened there? And this is the problem with the MCU right now, is that the continuity and the canon is so big that people are so wrapped up in what is happening in the MCU world, like why doesn't Doctor Strange show up or why doesn't Spider-Man show up, that they're not focused on the story itself. And I'm not saying that goes for everybody, because obviously people love Shang-Chi, people liked Black Widow, people liked Loki, Falcon, and WandaVision. But we're getting to the point now where a lot of people, and mostly fans, by the way, are just complaining about the fact that the MCU doesn't feel like it's a continuity anymore. And honestly, that's what I like the most about the MCU right now. I like the MCU right now telling self-contained stories. Because honestly, what made the MCU great in the first place was that it was self-contained. Was that each individual film, Iron Man 1, Captain America the First Avenger, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America Winter Soldier, the Avengers didn't show up for those films. Because they didn't need to. They just didn't. Like, duh, would it have made sense for the Avengers to show up in Captain America the Winter Soldier? Of course it would, but who cares? Because it was a good story. What I liked so much about Black Widow was that it was a Black Widow movie. What I liked so much about WandaVision was that it told a story from beginning to end. What I didn't like about Loki was that it was so obsessed with setting up the universe that it forgot to end its own story, in my opinion at least. That's why I didn't like that show. What I love about Shang-Chi is that it's its own story, with hints towards the future. That's what we love about the MCU. And that brings me to DC. Because look, honestly, the DCEU is just a mess. Like, Walter Hamada is a great executive, but the DCEU is an entirely just gigantic mess. But somehow, that is working in its benefit, because what DC is doing at this point is saying, well, if it's a mess, then we might as well just tell stories. We might as well just say, okay, Aquaman did well, Shazam did well. Let's give them sequels that are in their own little universes with maybe references to the DCEU at large. Let's make a Black Adam film with Dwayne Johnson. It looks incredible. It looks amazing. Let's make Shazam 2. I love Shazam 1. And basically, my most anticipated comic book movie over the next couple years, the only film rivaling it being Spider-Man No Way Home, is The Batman. Because The Batman doesn't have to adhere to its own MCU or DCEU. It can start its own trilogy. It can start its own universe. That's what people loved about The Dark Knight. So look, all that to say, am I still excited for the MCU moving forward? Absolutely. In fact, I think that there are really good ways to embrace the canon of the MCU, like with the Eternals. I think Eternals has the great possibility and the great opportunity to embrace the canon and say, we are just being a full-blown MCU movie. We're going to explain the entire history of the MCU as you know it. But then again, there's a film like Spider-Man No Way Home, which, look, I am as excited as anybody for Spider-Man No Way Home, but honestly, I would have rather had that film be maybe two separate films, because at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, we saw Peter's identity revealed, and that is a cataclysmically huge event in Peter Parker's life. If the entirety of Spider-Man No Way Home is just dealing with that fact without the multiverse and just dealing with how this impacts Peter Parker's life, that would have been an amazing movie. But Spider-Man No Way Home kind of felt like just an excuse to pick up from Spider-Man Far From Home, but then also include the multiverse at the same time. Which, again, looks amazing. It does. But still, I just look at films like The Batman and think, that's a self-contained film that just wants to be great. Honestly, Eternals might even be the same way, because while it is telling the history of the entire MCU, it just looks pretty self-contained. It looks like it's going to be its own story, and Chloe Zhao knows what she's doing. So at the end of the day, I just think, look, if you're gonna make a film, a comic book movie film, or just any film in general, What people have to remember, and what I think Loki forgot and got me worried about, is the fact that you have to make a good piece of art on its own. You can't be so focused on setting up sequels and setting up continuity, just like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was, just like Batman v Superman was, with the big three at the end and the Justice League videos. What makes me excited about a Shang-Chi 2, or even a Shang-Chi in the Avengers, is that he was so great in his own film, and that film was great. And that's why I want to see him again. Not because they shoehorned Captain America and Spider-Man in there, no. But because they made a great film. So those are my quick thoughts on DC and Marvel right now, and just why I'm excited maybe a little bit more for the individual DC projects. But again, I love them both. I'm really excited to see what each one of them has in store. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and join the Access Blockbusters crew. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.